So I am at the point where I said it was before. I was trying to finish reading all my books before I go for my vacation business trip and do what I want. So that's the best thing to say. And yeah, I know I do plan to do what I want to do. No one really controls me unless you directly communicate me and I like you or not. So what I'm gonna do is like I just want to establish this other book that I want to read. It's from Jocelyn Davis, A Time and Wisdom for Leading, I guess. So just might be interesting, and I might just summarize some parts if I express it or not. I'm not too sure. A reassuring and person. I think this is a quoting a kind of like a celebrity. I don't know who that is. McEnroe, who is kind of playing rackets, and one of the things that the writer really took enjoyment was his appreciation on his focus. He was focused, was observant, was reassuring, appreciative, calm. His word, tone, and body language felt aligned. There was no, you could felt basically. I feel like what you say, it's just like there was no lines of you feeling that you would feel hurt when interacting with him. I guess that's the best way of saying it. A rest established in the self, said Bhagavad Gita. No amount of pushing or pulling is more powerful than the sense of rest. So I like to take this in consideration. Come in value of like doing productivity and making expectations when I can't get engaged in something that I feel I should try to engage in a way that's positive, because for me it all builds up. The general idea is I want to be able to enter something feeling relaxed that I can do it and still give a very good performance. So being able to relax is still a safety net in some regards. The biggest impact a person have in terms of reliance and enjoyment, and like when we go out and find ourselves in the world, is generally the impression of not just being around people who just talk emptily. And though some people do go out there and put themselves out there, but the fact that they feel confident who they are. I guess confidence is a good way of saying, summarizing this word, but confidence in a manner that's like well adjusted, because they know what they want to do, and even if they make mistakes along the way, they still feel like along the way there's a direction and being able to get something done. That's the greatest way for me to like project in lines of someone talking about being able to be. Does that make sense? This is the idea of having good role models in your life, and that's the good direction of where I take a stance of like saying they help guide culture, they help guide development, and I also take a stance of like feeling direction of things need to be better. Toxic relationships past a certain point, I feel like they test too much on people's patience on certain things. So it's like I understand when they're young people who are young that you should let them develop themselves and figure it out, even if they have a bit of a bad personality. But at some point, they do need to kind of like quiet down and resolve. So that's the stance I'm kind of taking in perspective, in lines of like understanding characterization for certain things. The author likes to distinguish understanding between authority and power. Both are separate in the implication, and says authority is actually a myth. The two you can overlap, but the implication is they rarely completely. They tend to overlap, but not to your entire being. It holds that it's needed for order, but not to the point where it takes over your entire personality or your entire well-being. In fact, I would say it's quite the opposite. We aren't meant to be living as robots, as per se. Con artists, interestingly, supposedly con artists, this book likes to imply, have a decent amount of authority, but they have a little power, which again aren't necessarily overlapping between the two. what I would like to say is just like they they can't make things happen. Basically, they fall through. They're flaky. Yeah, so they're a bluff basically. Does that make sense? Con artists are a bluff. They aren't able to. They pretend to have more authority than they actually have. So this is the example of authority myth. A con artist. So everyone likes the idea of being their own boss, getting things in motion and managing people. But generally, the implication above is put out again as a stance of authority myth. It is our belief that it has a tendency to escalate. They aren't doing what I told them, so I'll issue clear instructions. They still aren't, so I'll shout louder. What's wrong with these people? Now I'll have to punish someone. And the bearings will continue until morale improves, as the saying goes. So I take a stance against this. I feel if people aren't doing this, they aren't respecting your authority, and it means you need to use someone else. This is where you need to separate from people, and this is in lines of toxic relationships. So if they don't follow through, you're wasting your energy and time on them, and you do have to move on. That's without a clause. So the fact that you may persist on this and keep pushing your stance on this, in that lines, it becomes a myth. Does that make sense? So you can try a few things, right? And I agree with that. But if the outcome doesn't come out the way you want, then you need to change up certain things. That's the honest truth of it, right? But the reason for it may not be what you think it is, right? It could be, again, the biggest thing you need to understand is communication. People receive and understand information about certain events in different ways. Whether it's relevant to them or whether it has overlapping attachments to their interests and what they like. And morality is also a standpoint, whether it gets mixed there or not. So this book comes in lines with a cross interaction with a book called Becoming a Manager. A Harvard professor, Linda Hills, follows a few dozen promoted sales managers through years when on the job. When first asked about their expectation, most of them said the same thing. The manager is the person with the power, the authority is the expert. Now I'll be the one calling the shots. I'm paid to make decisions. The buck stops here. But before long, says Hill, arose an unnerving realization. The manager says, you aren't evaluated on your own production, but instead on that of people who report it to you. Another said, who asked what she disliked about her new job, she said, the fact that you're not in control of anything. The only time you're in control is when you shut the door. And a manager with 6 direct reports said this. You're so used to being the inhibitor, you define your own parameters and your limitation, but the other 6 define the parameters and motivation. And you try to alter your behavior to get them to increase their ambition, but basically that is really hard to do. Distinguishing is like managers may have power, but they may not have authority. That's the overlapping things. So this is the opposite. Managers have power, but they don't have authority. Con artists have authority as a bluff, but they don't have power. I think this is the synonym of like what they're kind of trying to pull out from this book. They don't necessarily get people to do things more than they need to, especially if the workers under them don't like them. I want everyone to understand, like, when you read something, projection is also in lines of people's bias and their understanding. A sentence may feel cringy, a sentence may resonate you well, or what so. A good portion of like getting comes in alignment to it is explaining why you feel this way. This kind of gives you a sense of confidence because you've gone out and do stuff and know it's been bad experience or done something and that's left it to be a bit of a what's a good way of saying there's been issues. Make it clear that this book isn't trying to destabilize a hierarchy construct. It makes you challenge the implication of what you understand when you see someone as a manager or someone as a boss, right? In terms of like their skills, generally. I do like how people how they kind of word the implication of scaling of powers, and there are three type of people who like to chase powers: barons who strive for dominance over their perceived enemies, legalists who use rules and edits to exert control, seducers who lack a platform or a taste of direct confrontation, seeing influenced by using personal charisma. So being a what do you call being a what's the word I'm looking for? Research found that favor trading or mutual back scratching aren't what make a good aren't what make a person a good strong influencer. So if like doing a service and expecting a service back doesn't always mean that they synergize well. Don't think that's gonna be the case. But building credit in a sense of good karma isn't as a matter. And I guess as Eastern cultures influences grows from your contributes to a community, weaving a web of goodwill that benefits you along with everyone else. So it's like I don't know how else to say it. The leader of the people, knowing that when people put their efforts in saying they hope to achieve something in their lives, I think it's like a good approach is like they are relatable. Those tend to be stronger influencers that also builds a sense of trust and confidence in them. I do find it poetic that there's a lot of like words that have take origin from this particular language, whether it's French or Greek or Latin. You know, the implication of the old French influence meaning emanating from the stars, influence. So, and the origin meaning not to do with political maneuvers, but with great ebbs and flows of the natural world. Its influence, per Oxford Handbook, describes it as the action of water and other fluids and of immaterial things conceived as flowing in. Generally, there's a nice natural course of things because people can feel aligned and comfortable that this feels like a good direction to it, like a river stream, generally. So that they take about the implication of visualizing it. Okay, this is definitely okay. Water streams connecting together to make a lake or something like that. Generally, that's the idea of like what I'm kind of visualizing, and people talking about what influence is. If you can visualize it in your head, influence is put that analogy in what your thought process. It's all natural, basically. I now kind of come down to make the implication of Eastern philosophy, or is it? Or the idea is just like the impression was just like guidelines from cultural implication. So I guess this kind of speak to me in a sense of like understanding perspective. I'm just gonna read the quote because these parts of the books kind of stand out to me, and if I have to do a review, I want to really pick out the parts that I thought were interesting to the topic, or maybe feel or think something when I was reading them. So the idea of this was to said something about individuals who fully enter into relationships where the world is made of pistachio ice cream. A person of the east would see only ice cream. A person of the west would see only pistachios. So like it's perspective of seeing things that maybe in this perspective is they dislike. Obviously kidding in a more simplified stance because I would say the implication is maybe one reminds them of mistakes that they've done on their side, inevitably from, well, poor behavior conduct, but that's not really my problem. In fact, I'm quite nice to most Western influences, being very Westernized myself. So I am ethnically Eastern. Calling me a hybrid of a sort is fair, but like it's really just interacting with your environment, putting yourself out there, and socializing. Socializing is a big key word here. But yeah, I kind of took that in the contextual place, placade of a kind of debate that needs to kind of settle down and move on. I'm sure there's remnants of jokes that are cheekily put out there, and I've already kind of like expressed my thought process on those things. But yeah, generally, there are those things to debate and argue over a long term. I kind of
want to keep progressing in my life and my content and my opportunities to find ways to keep pushing myself and feel accomplished, because I've been going through a lot of like backtracking, going back and forth from issues, and I'm generally just someone that keeps pushing for like improvements. Application of religion placed down on certain things, coming in correspondence to Buddhists or Taoists, that are not automatically necessarily mean that they are associated to being a nice person. They're trying to say that religious figures will take an association of preaching it, but the individual itself doesn't necessarily mean that they don't take advantage of that influence that they hold in certain aspects. If you go into a kind of like dark thought process of like human nature, I will say that I think it's more people feeling constrained to the expectation of what they need to be on a personal, professional basis, in comparison to a externalized personal basis. These people just are inflexible. They didn't learn to make changes in themselves to become better persons and fit in so that they could find ways to be able to interact and socialize in ways that give them more flexibility in opportunities in life. Basically, I'd say they are lazy, as one way of saying it, without being too mean. Not lazy by not saying no, but lazy in the sense that they didn't try to find ways to like solve solutions in a more practical way. Because I do feel there's always a solution to something, really. But whether it's worth the effort, it depends on you. You have got to make those judgments and like play around with your lifestyle. It's an up-to-date basis, really. I don't know what this is. It seems poetic, so I felt I'd read it anyways. The idea of a creation hymn of the Rig Veda runs into follow. There was neither non-existence nor existence then. There was neither the realm of space nor the sky which is beyond. What stirred? Was there water bottomlessly deep? There was neither death nor immortality then. There was no distinguished size of night nor of day. The one breathed windless by its own impulse. Darkness was hidden by darkness in the beginning. With no distinguishing signs. All this was water. There was impulse beneath. There was giving force above. Who knows really? Who will here proclaim it? Whence was it produced? Whence is this creation? The gods came afterwards. I guess the medium here used of water comes in lines of natural flow. Generally, I think that notion's already explored before having come and play with this concept that people wanted to come and attribute it in terms of expression. I read many books before about the notion of well-being, and a lot of Japanese people actually practice this kind of idea and philosophy, not just in lines of meditations or thought process or like, because like I still have the book at this point. I haven't kept a record of it in terms of like analyzing for a book vlog, but this now comes in lines of a business philosophy called Kaizen, a continuous improvement, talking in terms of breaking down a company's vertical silo. Instead of needing to seek approval for every action from high Japanese employee made together. Don't become a yes man. I guess that's the biggest one, or a high man. I said that as a joke. So high be generally implying yes, right? So Western manufacture took note of the approach, and some fought by no means all were eager to adopt it. Okay. The impression is just being, even in the workplace, you can't be too nice to say that you like to do everything. It's just not physically possible, and it's emotionally and mentally taxing. You should just be doing what you need, and if you've got leeway and flexibility to help out in other areas, then yeah, that's the impression. You could do that. It does show a bit of dominant traits. I agree with that. If you're able to help out people in a workplace where people are struggling, but don't feel compelled that you need to do this. It's just admirable that you made the extra effort. You know, I just symbolize that those who like to like project themselves in terms of masculine traits in lines of their workplace, which I feel is something I kind of like, And I feel like at this stage, because of like where I need to find in terms of career development, with my situation of wanting to be successful, is probably where I'm going to be pushing myself. So I do have like side hobbies in the sense that I don't want to rely on that to feel like I need to fit in. I'm okay with just like taking a step back, but I feel I need to project myself, needing to prove myself in my work environment because I've been having so much difficulties in that situation and circumstances. Of if I've had to like project my honest feelings on certain things right now, but I'm not at that stage where I need to figure that out. I feel this is a good book in terms of like talking about authority stance in group positions. So this is is a leadership kind of book. The book kind of like puts in core practice in implying to get people to move as a motion. You need to invite participation, the implication that contribution to adding to a movement, such as sharing power, and then a third a factor in terms of aiding progress. All three core practices are needed in this stage of group development, but to varying degree. Its active participation is in the membership stage. Our main concerns should be to invite participation. In the control stage, which is where groups are most likely to get stuck, we need to, above all, be able to share power. Now, this can be a bit of leeway in certain aspects of it because, like, a lot of us need to like feel like you've kind of earned that position to take that kind of dominant stance. Not all of us would be very happy if like someone that we feel is just incompetent tries to take too much of that stance. I am for one of those things that I like to work with someone I feel like akin to, like in a sense that I respect and feel like he's done some cool stuff in terms of his achievements to where he is. And being able to share power is a bit something I feel can play on the weaknesses of narcissism. And in the performance stages, we should focus on aiding progress. This part I cannot really elaborate and get an importance of like how this comes in lines of like group movements, because like having seen this already, individualization pushes progress in different ways, and it puts in a point where it causes a message to be confluent. Does that make sense? They all act on their own accords, with a position of power that was formed as a group but didn't align, and that can cause chaos. That's my stance of it. If I had to like take into consideration of what I feel are things that are out of line, being a point victim of a lot of selfish behavior, trying to recover from my own situation onwards from this point. A good portion of like feeling good about a movement is generally time making and understanding that feelings are shared synergically amongst a group movement of people. And I feel a big portion of this core practice in lines of they can see the progress in everything is a good direction where we feel makes people feel more in lines of participation. That's what I mean, right? A chaotic hierarchy or structure will lead to like individualization, loss of trust, chaotic motions, bad behavior, or it will come to lines of like leading to things that will cause stress. So it's a big it can be pretty hard to act in lines of a unison for motions that evolve group influences for positions of power. Where I'm trying to understand, they're kind of giving a passage of someone analogy, but like I feel like people are getting an impression of someone being an answer person. Not necessarily, at least in my standpoint, where I take a lines of like expression. I take a lot of passion in analyzing and vocalizing my thought process of how I feel on things and how a group response would be. But generally, what I try to say is just like I have old conservative habits of making conversation growing up, enjoying certain outlets to certain things, making conversation with things. I never really said I never really implied that one person will know everything. It's quite the opposite. Very often, even in all great work industries, you need to ask people for help. You need to make that appreciation. Uh, in a whole motion of things, over time, you can get overly familiar with things. I like to like grasp my stance of where I would like to be. Come like if I had to take in an industry from examples from hearing inferences, it's easy for me to take gravity towards film industries of watching some YouTube this biographies, but I really like the development of Christopher Nolan, his knowledge and his passion for like filmmaking when he makes his films. Not that every single one of his films hit the mark for me in terms of like satisfaction and enjoyment, but we all know The Dark Knight was one of his most best movies, serialization globalized. But like he had that understand. What I liked about it was that he knew a little bit about everyone's job that was expected for the filmmaking process when you're trying to make their film as good as possible. And it's not just that he stuck to his role; he showed an interest in people and what they did, and made them cooperate. This is leadership skills that I feel are help make the work environment so appealing, and why a lot of workers gravitate towards being able to get the opportunity to do things, to work alongside with him. I mean, I think most of his films are relatively quite successful. So historical ones may not generally be the most cup of tea for everyone's appeal. I haven't watched some of his some friends in relation to also memes in regards to some actors that are now playing implicated roles towards externalization of a gag, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing the progress of how this is going to externalize because I thoroughly thought the first film was fucking cool. So I can't wait to see what the next part of that will be. And no, there's no undermining that. I think that's really awesome. Was the popularity of Easter eggs. Easter eggs representation for its popularity trends. So I think it will eventually move away. I think once I'm in a good spot, that's probably gonna end. But like, I can tell you like some people's depiction of like what they analyze on my character are misguided, unfortunately. But then again, everything is an interpretation of things. For the most part, people have seen in more those in lines of passion in the industries of outlets that they see that I represent maybe an old ideology of things, and I don't know if that's old fashioned or not. I get like at some point it peaks and then you're just it's not you get you plateau in terms of excitement. So later on onwards, even I was searching for answers to figure out where is it that I want to project myself in terms of still being. I feel like I am still in that position, putting aside gags, where I do have to like stand as a stance of being an expected role model. So I feel like that's not something I want to overly force onto my situation, given the circumstances of what's happened. Right? Does that make sense? But like I feel like individualization is important for everyone to like really feel the joie de vivre in things without necessarily saying that it was not necessarily saying that you don't follow. Chaos, yes, it started chaos, but generally, this is from the results of like a harsh environment and an inability to accept that okay, I don't want to go into detail because I actually been wanting to move on from this for a very long time because I want people to progress and feel better and therapeutically be able to feel happy about themselves. I've been trying to do that for a long time as well. It was mixed results and feelings about it, but that is a good portion of life. Give and try and keep learning. Thing to say is like if you show that you care in terms of your relationship attachments, knowing that you cannot prioritize everyone, then in my stance, I'm kind of in a position where I do need to find a bit of guidance. So I am trying and things because but like, I think if you do share care for people's relationship and and feeling good of people's effort, it's easy to gravitate towards what's the word I'm looking for? It's easy for people to feel like they want to they want to go to you and feel listened to, because you feel like you're going to add something to their life that they can feel that they can bring themselves, maybe from whatever problems that they are having. And again, the I am definitely not one person that's gonna say my answer to a person's circumstance is gonna work for everyone. That's absolutely utterly incorrect. But I have tried to put myself out there in different mediums, and understanding how certain things have put understand interpretation of certain things of moving groups and numbers. Again, together as a week we find strength in shelters. Another book another quote I read. I can't remember if it's the Outlast or something like that or something like this point. There's a few things I've read, right? Then I kind of want to just say like strength in numbers to be able to withhold maybe overcoming expectation of like popular cultures of norms. Yeah, I feel like that kind of like gravitate things, and then I do have to say no to things that like I kind of like let live other connection other people who have their own enjoyment and funds, but I have to prioritize the connections that I feel I'm going to work towards, and in terms of our expected happiness. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's what I mean. So like if you want to go that way for your personal enjoyment, I'm not gonna stop you, but I have to go the other way. So we have to part ways. Does that make sense? And I'm not saying that in a manner that's just like I look down upon you, right? If you have good work ethics and you have some form of talent or like something I can respect upon, I'm not gonna say like don't go that way. Fine, but I'm not going that way. Basically, we have to part ways generally. Seems to be okay. This is interesting. I couldn't reach help but look check it in terms of cultural differences and hierarchy positions. In the West, there is a hierarchy in lines of task hierarchies. Eventually, there are temporary structures that organize individuals for temporary purposes. They are kind of touch and go. There's no need for a long term relationship. In Asian societies, in comparison, they are characterized by relationship hierarchies, lasting networks reflecting the honor owned particular people. So like the attachment of like your work employments may have connectivity in lines of bosses or your mother, teacher. Like they know you. Does that make sense? They know your life or something like that, and who they understand a greater depth of like your environment, your personality, and what drives their influence. It's like they get to know you. In work placements, there is more of that superficiality in Western cultures. They see you as your purpose, and they may gravitate towards whoever's in power for whatever they have their needs, whether it's invasive towards people or not. I think that's the inevitable situation or circumstances of being familiar with it, because one of the saddest truth about things is that you can never be too you can never make everyone happy, so you gotta have to choose your ways of certain things. I do think Asian societies do orientate towards relationship hierarchies in terms of like it's more but that's not necessarily the case for like everyone. I never been in a very constrained. I never knew see an example in relation to this, since I never really had to like expose myself to Asian expectation of like cultures of like work lifestyle. Most of mine would be in relation to Western implication, which I do share that implied suggestion to coming across when it came down to like when you were exposed to clinical or where you would rotate it for the expectations of hospitals. Interaction would be touch and go from 1 week. The 1 week you be following through. You feel like you're really well connected. Next week you rotate to a different team. Sometimes they may say hi, but you're not in their priority or focus of attention. I kind of prefer that for efficiency, but the general implication of like relationships, kind of like that whole structure of like of a certain amount of what's the words that I'm looking for? Like having a dog or a pet, something that keeps you warm and like alive, and basically like throughout everyone's intents and motives and chaos, everyone's gonna do something for their own thought process, and that is kind of like the world. It's always good to have something that will always be there for you, and that, I guess the word is because you know that they want to. I shy away from saying they want to get attached to you or something like that, right? Something like that. So now it comes to answering aspects of this chapter covers something important for a business executive consultant who taught forum seminars in 1980. Much of her work was the top manufacturer of cellular phones, and was one of the influence classes she delivered to that company where there was an engineer, calling him Bill. Implication that Tracy places on this is in direction of saying he was too arrogant, even though he was termed or had the definition of being the answer guy, because whenever they asked, he would humiliate them, which is negative ways of authority, like taking stance of the workforce. A good portion of what I just like to read in terms of like Chinese philosophy was an implication of Confucius. Confucius apparently speak of no quality was more brutal than Ren, which translates to humanness or benevolence. Ren isn't just about being nice; it's about treating people as it's about treating people as ends rather than means, as being worthy of our concerns. The English phrase "neighborhood suppose" was a human spirit is captured in the Chinese word "liren." Li means neighborhood, but in the analytic translation "anpinchin," it could also refer to metaphorically to the sphere one travels in, including a profession and circle of friends. Liren then is a sphere of humanity, a community, physical and virtual, where people care for each other. I really like this quote. So this comes in line of like behavior, but it says like one of the things that makes it desirable is a person is not humane, cannot remain for long. Either is hard or easy circumstances, says Confucius, where a humane person feels at home in humanness, a humane community where there's stability and resilience. When members of groups to feel like they don't belong, they're likely to stay put and lean in when they feel out of place, as I did in my first few days of forums. They spend their time and energy searching for an exit. Moreover, individuals who lack humanity also lack patience and resolve, always on the lookout for a better crowd or more useful contacts. They don't remain anywhere for long. In human communities, it is perpetually leaking humans. From forums, from online application, influence seems to be constructed on one seeing perceived trustworthiness, which just says on three things: competence, do you deliver on promised results? 2, humility, do you admit that you don't know? And 3, cooperation. Generally, if you share a decision, do you share application decision making? Scratching a back may get a scratch back in return, but being seen as a competent, humble, and cooperative earn trust, and trust is what generates influence. There is a good portion of terminology here from China talking about a network of trusting relationship called guangxi, a central concept in Chinese culture. Guangxi is similar to karma in the Hindu tradition. A good portion of having being able to generate passive influence comes from the practicing of encouraging others to express objections and doubts.
Interestingly, on this book that I'm reading currently, eventually I saw why. The great lesson to be learned from yoga Vasipa comes not from the philosophy or the stories, wonderfully edifying as they are, but rather from watching someone spend 3 weeks, which is roughly the span of time the book covers, a fully engaging with another's anguish. The audience's initial cheers to his final words, and thus have I told you that L is worth knowing. Vasifa is open to Rama's pain. Indeed, he is nothing more than open. He honors it. Never does he show impatience. Never does he say that's enough worrying. You already asked me that. It notes the immaturity of particular questions that and say he'll get to it later, which he does. Generally, an objective scene the master handles not an objection, but the objective life sucks. And the other book this book highlights is objection. The theme of objection in an open forum generally means engagement. It means that people are paying attention to what you say and what's going on, and then express it. So it's a good thing to see objection in a political space. Asking a question is also the implication of putting an objection. Causation and effect are two different things, but it has been established that people may make the associated link between the two. They gave an example of a crow with a coconut falling, and people are trying to make the implication that the two sequences are independent from each other. But most people would put the causation saying because they saw the crow on top of the coconut and the coconut fell down, they would link the two in terms of the pattern behavior, which may not be necessarily true, but implored in this book. The other aspect of what you talk about is like the aspect of reading and different manage. The great philosopher Zhongxi in the Taoist classic is the equivalent of Vasifa in the idea of yoga. Well, what I'm trying to say is it's like they've made some great analogical quotes for their philosophy. One thing is just like when you read chapters either from the perspective of someone who leads or for someone who wants to work with leaders. What it means is excellent response from rulers or to use, or excellent response to use with the rulers. And where you resonate, it's just coming the ideology of when you read something, different perspective is kind of incorporated. Or at least this is what I understand of the case. Make an analogy, and I feel like that has some poetic sense inside. So the idea of the water worldview beloved by Eastern thinkers. Generally, oceans are not susceptible to performance management system, and a humane culture can't be manipulated any more than a river can be carved from the ocean. Or I believe rivers being easier to manage in society in comparison to ocean, where all is accessible in terms of like connecting oceans. So the more connectivity doesn't necessarily mean great establishment for its management, if that's what I understand. It's hard to manage too much connectivity, basically. Really placed out by Joan Barger. Generally, the leadership research shows that promoting the development of other people's talent, as in good form, if that happened, it was a place of learn and growth. But this had a higher correlation with what leadership skills were. Okay, so I think this is part of the sentence that I kind of like in ideas in terms of leadership skills. The smartest person isn't necessarily the room with the best ideas, but rather the person who draws everyone's best idea with him. A truly kind person amplifies the kindness of others. The most delightful friends are not the ones who tell a lot of jokes, but the ones who take delight in our own jokes. It isn't just flattery, but it is a big difference between the smoke blowers, "Darling, you look marvelous," and the people in whose presence we speak, sing, and behave better. The presence brings out the best of us, and it makes us feel better towards everything. 'Cause, like, we all have bad moments, you know. It's just knowing how to react on things and how is it that we can channel our energies in ways that we are always very good at bringing up positivity. As I like to say, real life things can be very demeaning, and for people to be patient with those people's faults, it can be a difficult process. You know, some people would prefer to just hang out with things that make them feel happy. We're all different. This is also the beauty of it. It's just, again, learning your way in your journey in your life. That's all I like to say. So greatness, we know their greatness by the greatness they elicit from us. And the same is true in whose presence we grow means, or better, or afraid. We know their smallness by how small we become when wisdom. So a big implication of power is a huge struggle when this book talks about sharing power. Sharing power is the hardest thing to do and the most important thing to do.
In groups control stages for group development, it becomes especially easy for people to get caught in power struggles. The early excitement and esprit de corps have waned. The work is proving more arduous than anyone expected. Individuals are anxious to be recognized and to be heard to get in their way. By sharing power, their quiet influence will reduce anxiety and increase confidence. Everyone's confidence, so the group becomes less inclined to internal squabbling and more inclined to forward motions. This book likes to describe sharing power as three types of power chasers. The Baron. The Baron sees life as a perpetual battle with enemies on every side. The Legalist is about exerting control through bureaucracy. And the Seducer, which uses charisma to win others.
So this is common in lines of most of us tend to see our relationship as falling into a continuum of either friend or foe or enemy. If I get well with someone, a colleague who says he's easy to work with and pleasant and a lunch companion, you could label this person a friend, perhaps a casual friend. But that other guy, the one who always rude and difficult, he's not an enemy, but he's certainly no friend. The viewpoint is inadequate. Lawrence Stillbill and Marianne Peabody writes in the article Sloan Managed Reviews. Relationships should always be arrayed along not one but two dimensions, whether this person is with us or against us, and whether their stance is conditional or unconditional. Combined with these two dimensions gives us a main relationship types. So we can classify our attachment and how we behave around friends, foes, allies, and adversaries. Friends are unconditionally with you, and foes are unconditionally against you. Between allies and adversaries. Allies support you, while adversaries oppose you when it suits them. Generally, it turns they can switch alliances from one place to another. Allies supporting you based currently share interests. Adversaries opposing you based of currently conflicting inner interests. So there's a confliction or positivity within you. Developing a good relationship with someone is generally talking to them, listening to them, and sharing our viewpoints, to also seek an understanding of their viewpoints. None of this is really rocket science. A lot of it is in lines of communication. Modern barons who are power chasers are absolutely and utterly obsessed with status. Like him, they can't bear to be laughed at, and like him, their worst fear is to lose whatever contest they imagine is going on. Unlike legalists, barons are fine with subordinates being a bit unruly. Unlike seducers, they have little need to be liked. Respect is their essential demand. Earlier, I noted that there's no culture has a multiplicity of power chasers. Western cultures, however, because of their strong emphasis on individuality, are more likely to regard life as a struggle in which one is neither a winner or a loser. Robert Greene, in his book of Law of Power, illustrates the view of parade of historical leaders successfully pursued absolute domination in their area. I was mentioned this before in terms of cultural references. This book does come in lines of talking a lot about Indian cultural religious influences that come in lines of powers. Now we're coming along to talk about the last power dynamic that the book describes, from baron to legalist to also now seducers, which are power chasers. Seducers don't want to beat their enemies or control subordinates. What they want is they want to be loved and admired. The Ganji literature, which I was just reading right now, gives a good example of a power chaser, which is of a seducer. He's not driven by lust or his needs to have lots and lots of people, women mostly, but men giving him attention and thinking he has two wonderful rewards. Every character in the story marvel at Genji's beauties and talents, and on occasion even wondering if he might be the Buddha reincarnated. We get the sense.
So, talk about passive influence. Generally, they talked about people sharing power. So, in the preceding chapters, was a historical context of characters who tried to build influence. The Savitri, Emperor Gaozu, and Tama Kuzura increased their power not by seizing power, by sharing it and amplifying it through a shrewd alliance making, good fellowship, and soft technique. The strategy is the same. Instead of battling your adversary for an existing pie, you make a bigger and new pie and invite them to the table. Quotes during plays to influence yourself included an implication of an individual that he was coaching and said this: "I can't do these things because my boss won't let me." Which he retorted to say, "Tell me how your boss has responded that makes you think that. What is the evidence? It is fair to say you lay the blame on somebody else's feet to passively influence yourself to take action." And apparently, by Court Chilton, 80% of influence is managed from your own reactions to other people. You have to influence yourself if you can hang in while the storm rages. That is a form of influence. They'll say that person has an even keel. The wind blows harder, but they keep going, and I want to be like that. It is the attachment of the thought that causes pain. The thought is just a thought. This may kind of offer lines in terms of traumatic feelings. For Buddhism, we'll say there's no such thing as an observer, no essential I that persists over and above the stream of mental phenomena. For reality, a network of constantly shifting, flowing, interdependent processes, and each so-called person is just a tiny and equally fluid part of a vast matrix. That doesn't mean you don't exist, it simply means you are not the fixed entity that you imagine yourself to be. You are rather a flame within a greater fire of being. Which view, Hindu and Buddhism, do you find more compelling? For me, the Hindus have the edge. Either philosophy, however, will serve the practitioner mindful as well. The implication is that Gandhi said to stop trying to master other people, but instead master yourself as a person. Stop fighting our perceived oppressors, and instead fight to free ourselves from our oppressive monkey mind. If we became free, India is free. Quote from Gandhi.
So a bigger implication of generating influence comes in trust. People trust you, they will move towards you. If you trust them and you care about other people's success, people will move. Otherwise, they will listen to you, but they won't move towards you with their hearts.
So the concept of mindfulness defines the ability to observe one's thought and emotion with detachment and resolving in themselves being a stronger person. There's a link between the two for personal growth, and it might not be so clear what it means to live in mindfulness.
So the practice of Zen, or the implication of when I first began learning about Zen, I was surprised at how often Zen centers encourages not to sit and meditate, but to sit and meditate with others. Zen is not a solitary practice. From Hiroshi and Kyo Ohara of the Impaya Institute of the Zen Center. We chant at the end of our liturgy, and we realize Buddha's ways together. Meditation is mindfulness, as in a sense.
So this part now talks about the attending of upstream factors more than downstream results for quiet influence. It talks that most leaders focus on wrong things. They focus too much on the pace and process and not enough on the people, thereby creating a superficial speed, like a hamster on a wheel, rather than speed that leads to genuine, sustained progress. The worst leaders emphasize pace. They announce, "We're moving fast," and then when the inevitable hitches occur, screams, "Hurry up." Slightly better leaders emphasize mostly on the process. They gather masses of data, weave it in intricate charts and graph showing how the work will proceed, distribute the PowerPoints, and then upon discovering that the best flowcharts in the world have zero power to inspire anybody to do anything. The best leaders focus on people, specifically 3 people factors. There's a difference in opinions from teams, from companies. Faster companies says the team captures and communicate lessons learned from the initiatives, while slower companies say his team move on to other assignment without a formal debrief. In faster companies, they say team members are comfortable talking about problems and disagreement. In slower ones, people say believe in keeping their cards close to the vest as the best way of getting ahead. Senior leaders of faster companies say are closely aligned and committed to the success of initiative. In slower company, initiatives succeed in spite of lack of unanimous senior level support, and so on and so on. They kind of like focus on different aspects of it, how I understand it, in terms of a good company that does things quicker or a company that does things slower. focus on alignment, openness, flexibility, and learning and teamwork. The irony is the managers in the store companies thought that by charging ahead without regard of self-stuff, they would move faster, which wasn't the case. They equate attending to people's issue with having to wade through a moral of human emotions, questions, quirks, and complaints. Factors are all described as either clarity, unity, and agility. Clarity is shared, a clear understanding, communication. Unity is agreement of the merits in that direction on the need to work together to move ahead, so cooperativity. And agility is the willingness to turn and adapt quickly. It was keeping strategic goals in mind.
So there's three things that we'll talk about in terms of like having presence in work. The book describes that through a passage and analogy that the three ways of being able to do this involve the following: paying attention, doing things yourself, and working with what you got. So as I was saying before, the book talks about different types of shame. Toxic shame is the belief that there's something fundamentally wrong with us. And healthy shame is when we decide to take responsibility for our mistakes. So there's good shame and bad shame.
Hey everyone, thank you for putting the effort to watch the effort I placed on making something of an entertaining video. I hope you enjoyed it. As I said before, it's not forced, but like I really would appreciate any contribution and support you give to this channel, as it gives me more motivation and more incentive to enjoy more video creating and content creation. If you find that the content's drifts away at any point, you can always unsubscribe. It's no big deal. Again, it doesn't mean much. It doesn't take much from you, but it means a whole bunch of me. And it would feel great if you would just reward my efforts of trying to be, positive and contributionary. Thank you so much. Bye.